Just doing that now. I'd be really grateful if you don't mind perhaps muting yourselves for the moment while I'm just going through everything, just in case we've got phone calls going off, doorbells, dogs, all that kind of thing in the background, so thanks. I'm Caroline Robertson from ActifHR, and thanks ever so much for joining the webinar today. We're based at Silverstone Innovation Centre, and actually we're up there at the moment in the main area, so apologise if there's a few conversations going on in the background, but it should be all fine. So we provide employment law and human resources. We specialise in high performance and high tech engineering, manufacturing businesses, but really we provide support to a whole range of businesses. I also run another business called Employment Law Support, so a lot of you may know me from that. I qualified as a solicitor over 20 years ago. I worked as an employment lawyer in private practice, and then I set up an HR employment law consultancy to business. So that's been going for probably about 15, 16 years. As you can imagine, we've had a lot of emails, a lot of calls dealing with the coronavirus issue. I've put on 3 webinars already, and I know a number of you have joined those, so thanks for that, about mainly to do with furloughing employees we've been discussing. So this is the next in the series. Just before we start, just a few housekeeping. I'll probably speak for about 20 or so minutes, 20, 25 minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer session. As I said, if you can keep yourself muted until the question and answer session, then just unmute yourself and fire a question at me. I will check the chat box, but if you can possibly just throw a question at me, I'll look at the chat box probably more towards the end, as it might be difficult to check the chat and answer questions live at the same time. So I'm going to kick off, and I'm going to share my screen. Okay, is that all right? So really looking at the idea of trying to return to work. Now, I know there's a lot of businesses in and around where I'm based at Silverstone Park that actually have some employees in the workplace. So, you know, that's certainly what is going on. I know there's a lot of businesses that are completely mothballed and haven't got any employees working in the workspace. So we have seen, of course, with the latest guidance, the extension of the furlough scheme, that's now been extended up until October. And with that guidance from August to October onwards, it's allowing employees to work part-time, and they still get the benefit of furlough pay, though employers are expected to contribute to the salary cost. Recent announcements have given encouragement to those who can't work from home to go into the workplace. Employers need to strike a balance between the desire to open that workplace and the very real risk posed by Covid-19. I'm sorry about the noise in the background. We're just going to ask them to be a bit quieter. The guidance is very clear that employers need to do a Covid-19 risk assessment and put up a notice. So they're very clear that they should be putting up a notice in their workplace to be clear that they've done that risk assessment and the steps that they've done with that. So some of the things we'll be looking at will include workplace zone allocation, employee consultations, high traffic use identification, and cleaning schedules. Now, a lot of businesses are adopting what we call something called clean practices, and they are something that I will be taking you through the clean practice. So I'm just moving on to the next slide. I think we've dealt with some of the latest guidance. The 10th of May, of course, you're all aware, will be that continue to work from home, apart from those that can't go into the workplace. And the key thing, of course, if we do go into the workplace, is observing the social distancing guidance. Then from there, if working from, yes, as I said, if working from home is not possible. Sorry, I think we've gone forwards. So members of staff who are vulnerable, as well as individuals who may live with, should be supported so that they can follow the recommendations set out in the guidance on social distancing and shielding. And where social distancing can't be followed, business that's when they have still the guidelines to consider whether that activity needs to continue for the business to operate, or if what other mitigating actions we can possibly take to reduce that risk of transmission between staff. And if we can't do social distancing, this is part of our COVID COVID-19 risk assessment. Obviously, of course, if staff are unwell with symptoms, we should continue to make them self-isolate and shield themselves. So the guidance is really clear about we need this COVID-19 risk assessment. And then to put this notice up to show that we've done that. And I appreciate many staff members who are being asked to return to work are beginning to feel anxious about coming back to work. And the key is to involve them in that process, to consult with our staff throughout this whole process, to also involve them in this workplace assessment. So let's move on. Really, we've got returning to the workplace. The two main goals we've got, of course, are to look after the safety of workers in that workplace. And then part of that is their workplace morale, dealing with employees' fears, who in turn, and in turn that will increase their productivity if they feel safe returning to the workplace. That will allow us to reassure also the vulnerable workers. So there'll be those with underlying medical conditions. That might be age, they might be pregnancy, or those employees who live with those vulnerable people who are there having to protect as well. So if people feel that management is looking after them and looking out for them, they're able to feel safe and not so uncertain about, and creating that positive return to work to increase productivity. And I'm finding employers that are involving those employees with that and getting people excited and proactive in the workplace, and how you manage the return to work, it will have huge benefits. Now, I've just noticed in the chat, one person's having a problem hearing. Okay, that's fine. So clean practices, that's the key to this, really, of putting a system of clean practices in place in the workplace. Clean practices, they complement, they don't replace social distancing. It's only a guide, it's not a guarantee of eliminating disease transmission, and you are reducing the odds of further infection with these practices. So I'm going to take you through a step-by-step guide on how to put these key clean practices in place with your risk assessment document. So let's move on to the next slide. The government's really clear with the latest guidelines that just come out to help you to decide, but you have to have these risk assessments in place, and you have to carry out. So you, as employers, you have to have a health and safety risk assessment anyway, but this, of course, is particular to the COVID-19 risk. We would do that just as we would with any other health and safety related hazard, and that is usual that we have that in consultation with workers and unions, if we've got unions, if they're applicable. So, of course, as an employer, you've got a responsibility to protect your workers and others from any risk of health and safety. This means that we need to think carefully. What are the risks? What can we reasonably, practicably minimise those risks so that we can do everything we can to eliminate those risks of COVID-19 in the workplace? So again, we have that duty to consult. So it's about, when we start off with a risk assessment, it's not about creating huge amounts of paperwork. I have a very straightforward risk assessment document put together. I do have to charge for that, but I put that together, which covers all the zones, all the rooms. So that's really what we're looking at. If you've got fewer than 5 workers, or if you are self-employed, you don't actually have to write anything down in a risk assessment. That's part of the health and safety regulations, but I would advise that you do. Your risk assessment will help you to decide whether you've done everything you need. So we know there's a vast, complex body of health and safety regulations, but in summary, by setting up that risk assessment, we'll set up a system of work which will allow us to put in place all the social distancing guidance that we can. That could be screens, it could be people working back to back, whatever we will take from each zone of our office to keep to those systems of work guidance, keep that under review. So the government guidance, which was published on the 11th of May, it does not replace existing law. It's additional guidance. So I'm going to be taking you through this 10-step plan, which I've put together to allow us to put this this clean practice in place. I just need to let you know that if you're a business of more than 50 workers, you are expected to publish your risk assessment document on your website and display that notice as well around the workplace. So don't forget that I know many areas of your business or your building, depending on where your business is, they may have been mothballed. You might have had a skeleton staff going in, but you just need to do possibly a deep clean to start with. You also need to think about the water systems, and I've had companies that rung me and said, look, actually, we need to make sure the kettle is properly clean, the fridge is properly clean. You've got water sitting in water heaters. We've got Legionnaire's disease to think about. You've got water areas that need to be properly cleaned if you've got zones that have been potentially mothballed for a while. So let's move on to this 10-step plan. So that's what this looks like. Is we start off with, as I said, the template risk assessment document to create our plan, and developing that plan, the good practice, is essential. So the faster you can put a plan in place, which you can talk about with your staff to return to work, the greater the benefit is, because they will begin to feel anxious if we're beginning to ask them to return to work. Around 80% of people who have the virus, they display minor or no symptoms at all. So that's why we need to maintain really high standards of hygiene and infection control in our risk assessment. So we're undertaking that initial workplace assessment. The best way companies are doing this with clean practices is to divide your workplace into zones. And actually, it is as simple as, and I don't want to make it complicated, to just draw a map. You might have a scanned map of your workplace. It can be just a black and white, drawn on an A4 piece of paper or an A3 piece of paper of all the rooms and zones in your office. And you might want to scan that in, and we use colours to mark up each zone. So from there, we're very clear: kitchen, bathroom, corridors. When you actually go through staircase, reception area, main office, boardroom, breakout rooms, you might have a warehouse, you might have a loading bay. Each one has a colour and a zone. It allows us to have some kind of understanding and responsibilities for those zones. And it's really helpful to allocate a zone team leader. It doesn't need to be a senior person. Often it's the people who are most engaged in their particular area that says, I'd like to actually just be aware of, be part of this discussion, be part of this assessment of this particular room. So the way you do a clean practice assessment of that workplace or of that zone, that room, is you walk in a spiral around the room, around the workplace, starting from the edge of the room. So you're starting from the walls. And the concept is to have a system in place of walking in a spiral where you won't miss a surface which has a high frequency touch point. So you're looking for areas where more than one pair of hands is going to touch in a 72-hour period. And that's the time limit, of course, that COVID-19 will stay on that surface for. And we're also looking for social distancing touch points. So by having that map in front of you, and you walk maybe with the other employee that perhaps will be the team leader of the zone, and you're walking together, of course, observing social distancing, and you're highlighting, and I'm just looking around the room here now, I've got, light switches, radiator panels. Perhaps you've got the control on the radiator or an air conditioning panel. I'm looking at a whiteboard. People, are they going to be touching the whiteboard? You've got blind holders that pull the blind down. You've got obviously table surfaces. So you can actually, you don't realize it until you're sitting in that room and walking in a spiral around the room, going inwards, how many high frequency touch points you've got. And just a plain risk assessment document, you will translate that list onto your risk assessment document, You don't necessarily have to if you've got the map. So with the map, what you do is you put a cross or whatever you want, a mark on the map of those high frequency touch points. And then while you're doing that, you sticker them. So we have a range of coloured stickers for each zone. Now, I know this is sounding a little bit Blue Peter-like, but it's working, I can tell you. You have a range of coloured stickers, and you stick a sticker on the high-frequency touch point. So by putting a sticker on the light switch or next to it, or by the blind pull down, you have visual cues all the time where people will see that that's where people are constantly touching. So, if you, as I said, then those labels highlight clearly the risk areas for people. And they also allow people, because we have to have a cleaning schedule in place, a write down schedule. And when we've got the stickers, we don't miss anything. It's very clear, and we can be aware of areas to have a frequent cleaning. So we can translate very easily those high frequency touch points. We also on our map should put a cross or something where we think it's going to be hard for people to observe social distancing. And those are most likely going to be the corridors, door areas perhaps, or whatever. So we build trust by sharing our plan. And, you know, obviously the senior team will be sharing the plan, but that zone leader may want to share the plan with their people that work in the room, as well as, of course, we need to share the plan with all the other zones of the building, with the rest of everybody else who works there. So we tend to have one zone team leader in charge of each room. As I said, they could be the office junior, it doesn't really matter. This allows them to feel a bit of engagement. It encourages participation, and then they've got that ability to be able to check that people are part of the cleaning schedule, whatever it is. So I said, they don't need to be line managers or supervisors. You can have a discussion with staff who they'd like to be. Make sure they have time out of their day. And we do need to build in a cleaning regime, and we'll talk about that. But again, they need to have time built out of their day to do so. So, you know, encourage feedback from employees. What do you think? Have I missed any areas? What does it look, you know, what do you think about it? And it's vital to build them into that process. And, you know, that workplace assessment doesn't have to take very long. It can be an hour going through the zones together, and keep employees up to date of any latest guidance that's coming out. So, you know, we demonstrate that plan with them. And from there, we are able to, you know, get their engagement on what they think of it. It's really important that a part of this is that we do get employees to change lifelong habits, and this is the hand washing lifelong habits. Now, I know a lot of employees have been at home for 8 weeks and they are not washing their hands because they're at home. When we get back into the workplace, and again, this is sounding very obvious, but we have to get them to do effective hand washing, and that cannot be emphasized enough, because that is the biggest way of dealing with, you know, the transmission. So it is worth making employees hand wash when they come into the building, every couple of hours, at the lunch break, when they leave, you know. And we have to lead by examples as managers. We have to do that ourselves. We have to be showing we're doing it, and it's a change of a lifelong habit of what we do in the workplace. And you should put posters up to remind staff. I've got posters, you know, on my template, but you know, it's posters that you put up in obvious places to get them to remember to do that. And I've even had one company that when they all came back into the workplace, or a few of them came back into the workplace, it happened that two people had their birthdays, and the managing director just demonstrated hand washing by singing happy birthday to these two people, just to emphasize the need of how important this was, and he was doing this, and this is what everybody needs to do. So we need to say, look, let's not touch these high traffic areas like door handles, lift buttons, access panels, microwave buttons. There's a whole load of those, fridge handles, whatever, if we can. So we need to, as part of our risk assessment, well, we can have boxes of tissues dotted about at these main high frequency touch areas. We can have a bin right next to the door. We can have wipes. We can have hand sanitizers. So when people are going through these traffic areas, they can just use a tissue and drop it straight in the bin. Or as long as they don't do that, they just make sure they keep washing their hands and don't touch their face, don't eat food if they've touched any of these areas. Disinfectant sprays, keep them in those areas, because we need to be instilling a cleaning schedule. And again, as managers and leaders, we can show them how we would go through all these areas, how we would use various different wipes and tissues and drop them in the bin, but I'm sure your staff are far too intelligent, we need to do that with. So again, it's vital to set up a realistic cleaning schedule and build that into people's day to wipe down the high frequency touch areas for the different zones. So we would normally ask our team leader to put a schedule together, and again, I've got a whole range of templates, cleaning schedules and things like that, that we ask the team leader just to put the schedule together. They might have 4 people in that office, and we just have a rota, whereas perhaps, I don't know, it might be morning and night, it might be once a day, you decide what's best for you. One person in turn will go around and with the wipes and the disinfectant spray perhaps and wipe down all those high frequency touch points. And the senior leaders should participate in that cleaning regime, because COVID-19 of course does not respect rank, and it is really important that the managing director and all the other directors take it in turns. You will get complete buy-in and respect and appreciation if you take it in turns and you're seen to go round, potentially with your gloves on or whatever you want, just with a wipe, and wash and clean things down. It'll take you 5 minutes. Make it visual. So as I said, we've discussed, each zone uses a different coloured sticker. Each zone has a different colour area. Some cleaning products say they last for 24 hours, but it'd be wise to wipe down these touch points, which have stickers on them, twice a day, once a day, whatever you think. Some products you need to have to leave on for a while before you wipe it down, but the stickers are that constant reminder to people, and I've found that businesses have actually, when employees see those, it helps enormously for them feeling safe in the workplace. The stickers speak for themselves, and you can, after a while, you don't need the stickers anymore because people are so in tune with it. So again, put the posters up, and so it's really about plan, do, check, act. Plan, there we go. We do the plan with them, we share it, we get them involved, we get on with it, we do it. We don't just put a plan in to have the plan and then nobody actually does the cleaning and stickers up. We've got to get on with it, and we check it. The zone team leader or whoever's looking after that area, that room, just checks that people are doing the cleaning, and we need to give that person and tell the rest of the staff that that person absolutely has the responsibility to check up on them, and act to show that we've actually also, as managers ourselves, we changed our lifelong habits by changing our, making sure we're washing our hands and all of that. So we need to follow up. We need to check on our workplace assessment. Normally after a week, we say do another review, do another walk. Quite good to get a new set of eyes. Sometimes maybe ask somebody from the workshop to come into the office area and walk socially distance with you to see what you've missed in the office, and someone from the office go into the workshop and cross-pollinate them so they can just have a look and see what you've missed. But it's good to do another workplace assessment after the first week. And again, the most important thing is eliminating disease transmission vectors. What I mean by that are refrigerator doors. Encourage people to bring in their own cooler bags, maybe. Eliminate doorknobs. Can we put hooks on doors? Can we have doors that we can push? So, what adaptions possibly can we do to the workplace? If you've got lifts in your workplace, not many of you will have, but lifts, we have to have guidelines about how many people can go in the lift, and you'll know the space of your lift, and maybe only one person can be in that lift at a time. Of course, you've got lift buttons we need to wipe down, or have a tissue by the lift area so you can then just drop that in the tissue and you touch the lift buttons. So accountability, again, that's part keeping people involved, and to expand that trust very much by, with employees, we have to continue to consider if they do show any symptoms at work, then if we only pay SSP, statutory sick pay, we may need to consider paying them 2 or 3 days full pay, just to encourage them to make sure that they do stay at home to begin with and see. I appreciate they have to isolate for 12 initially for 7 days, but then possibly 14 days. But we may need to consider paying them slightly more than SSP so they don't encourage them to come into work. And it's about sharing our plan. I am saying to companies, don't be protective about your plan. The goal is to make sure that they have clean practices at work and at home. If they live with other people, some people may live in a shared house, maybe let them take the risk assessment, the plan back with them. Show them what you're doing at work, because you want those employees they might live with to go into their businesses and say, this is what we are doing. You know, actually, can we do something, make sure we do something very similar, because you don't want them bringing through the shared household things back into the workplace for you. So going on, so pretty much I'm conscious of time and people might have questions, but you know, in summary, really, where possible, require workers, of course, to continue to work at home remotely as we are, and the government guidance is clear on that. We are much better at seeing now the benefits of home working, and actually that is working. I know a lot of businesses potentially may consider that we can continue to home work on a less than temporary basis in the permanent, and maybe have 2 or 3 days that people will always now work from home. It's about, as part of that risk assessment, can we divide up our teams? Are we going to have fixed teams? Are we just going to have fixed teams that maybe come in 1 week and then another fixed team come in the next week so they don't overlap with each other? You know, that's a possibility. Or we just have people that have stagger their hours, and because of childcare, I know maybe some schools may be going back. Because of childcare, we'll probably staggering hours anyway, people starting earlier, finishing shorter working days, and then working at home, so that we have, you know, less people in the office at the same time. So we're, you know, as part of our course, that risk assessment, it's really important to do that zone allocation and marking up the high frequency touch points and the social distancing touch points. We might need floor markings where we think social distancing is just to highlight people, where the door areas, reception areas, and include, make sure you've got enough hand sanitizer, tissues, bins, all of that. And again, as I said, make them change their lifelong habits. So as I said, some companies are doing one-way systems to allow people to make sure that they don't cross. So that's easier if you've got 2 sets of stairs, or you know, different doors in and out. Some companies are doing screens between workers. Some companies are just marking off desks so that you have a row of 3 desks and you just mark off the middle desk. So nobody will ever come and work in that middle desk, so you'll always have your 2-meter area. Some companies are taking chairs out of desk areas so people can't sit down in them. Obviously, we're not hot desking anymore. Boardrooms, we are taking chairs out of boardrooms. So instead of having 8, we only have 4. And as I said, you know, obviously most of the meetings we could do virtually, but there were a few where we will want to meet you know, in one room possibly. Workers are sometimes working back to back, so they're not facing each other. I know that sounds a bit bizarre, but again, it's all about that social distancing. And you know, and the key thing is obviously making sure we put a cleaning schedule in place, and we're reviewing that. So that's pretty much from me. We can do a whole range of templates on all of those, and I've got some packages which I'll send out to you if anybody does want any of those as a package, or various different. We can do a separate just the risk assessment document if you want that as a price. So anyway, I'm conscious. Thank you very much. I'm going to now come off the screen share, and please feel free to anybody fire a question. Hopefully there'll be some questions out there. If you are going to fire a question, if you could just unmute yourself.
Caroline. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Colin.
Hi, Colin.
Thank you, Adam. Just a very, very quick one. Great webinar. Thank you ever so much for allowing me to attend.
Thank you.
Air conditioning.
Yeah.
Any guidance on that? It's obviously, you know our premises reasonably well.
Yeah.
We're very spaced out, but unfortunately, like every 90s building, we suffer from extreme heat in the summer, and air conditioning is quite important. I haven't seen much guidance anywhere about air conditioning and health and safety on that. Is there anything you can add to it? Or
no, and I haven't seen any guidance. You're absolutely right on it. What we really are asking people to do is do the clean, the deep clean of all those units, and getting them really, really well cleaned and maintained. And I suspect probably the best thing is just, because of course air conditioning can circulate, it's the worry of it circulating the air, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So I think probably the best thing would be is make sure that we have a limited number of staff in those areas, or we have fixed teams where you're bringing one team in, and so that we're not constantly mixing people up. But I'm sorry, Colin, I haven't seen very much at all on air conditioning.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Adam.
Okay. Hi, Caroline. It's
Hi,
Adam
Adam.
from Design Rule.
Hi.
I've not been into the office recently, but what precautions are they taking in the Innovation Centre from your list of things? So they're doing markups and stickers.
In the Innovation Centre?
Yeah.
I know that, of course, the Innovation Centre is shut for visitors, for anybody. It's only people that want to access the office space in the Innovation Centre who've got an office here that are allowed in. I know they've got absolute minimal staff. There's nobody on reception. They've just got security, and they've got a cleaning. I think they've got a cleaning regime going on, but
Can do
apart from
inside our office, but when you're talking about shared kitchens and stickers, it's not. I guess it's not our responsibility. It's the Innovation Centres.
It absolutely is, and the shared kitchens, those are the areas, of course, which is the biggest area of concern in terms of shared kitchens and bathrooms. I can have a chat with the Innovation Centre, but it's worth double checking with them yourself as well.
I will do.
Because they should have a risk assessment in place or something in. Oh, I've got from the security a note. He's behind me. Lift up, thank you. That's very impressive. Would you like to? Lifts up, stairs down. Deep clean takes place every day in the kitchen, Adam.
Okay.
Between 7 and 9. Does that answer your question? Some of them.
That's fine. Yeah.
Thank you very much, security. What a great response that is. Anybody else? You're all very quiet out there. I've got a few questions I've had thrown at me. Just how do we manage a site with lots of people coming in and out? So the lots of people would be potentially not staff members. They would be people from outside, the equivalent of clients or customers, I'm assuming. So then that's something that you will have to address very carefully on a risk assessment. I would certainly make sure that I'm just having a look. Client delivery. So I would very much say that you need to have those clean practices that I've been talking about. That is what you're going to have to be very, very clear and have a notice up, because you're having people from outside. So a lot of companies have customers that they're dealing with, and of course, as much as we can, they're doing that virtually. And we still have, under the health and safety regulations, we still have a duty of care to the health and safety of our customers and anybody from outside. And so we would need to build that in as a separate element of our risk assessment. And wherever possible, to deliveries, some companies are having a safe box outside the door, so deliveries don't need to actually come into the office, or they have a system where that delivery person is ringing just the doorbell or whatever it is, and it's clear that there's a drop box, it's secure drop box or whatever you need, so they're not accessing the premises. If we've got customers, hopefully most of the time we can deal with that virtually, but there will be times potentially where you might need to have a face-to-face, and we will allocate, as you will, only one space that customer will come to, and that needs to be, we may have to have gloves that we give to customers as they come in. We may need to make sure that only one of us would meet that customer, and where that customer, the room they go into, that they have the right social distancing in place, that we have hand sanitizers on the table, that we have tissues so they can go in and out. So all the things I've been talking about, we have to very much make sure that we have looked at where's the entrance exit point for that customer, what high frequency touch points are they dealing with on the way, and what we can do to minimize the risk. The best we can obviously do is not have them coming on site, but there'll be times when we need to do that. I hope that's answered that question. I'm just looking up to see if there's anything else that is Yeah, can we bring staff back on part-time hours from full-time in June due to financial downturn? Yes, you can. Well, not from June, not till the 1st of August. So if you bring them back in June, then they will not get the benefit of furlough pay. You can just bring them back and you would then pay them for their part-time hours. If you bring them back, so the furlough pay from, and we've got Roger, who's an accountant on the call, and he'll know much more about it than me because you'll be dealing with it. But if you bring them back, of course, from the 1st of August, you can get the benefit of them working part-time and still get some furlough pay for them. So just seeing if there's anything else. Anybody else got some questions they might want to fire at me?
Oh, hi Caroline, it's Claire from Blazer Mills.
Hi Claire.
Hi, thanks for having us on the webinar.
My pleasure.
Just wondered, is there a date that we have to publish the risk assessment on our website by?
Not that I can see. I've checked the guidance, and I can't see a date. So that, as I said, the guidance is it's not legislation. It doesn't replace or add. It's not a regulation effect in terms of legislation to the health and safety, but it is, the guidance is saying that you should publish for more than 50 workers. All it will do, hopefully, is if there's a claim, a health and safety claim of any sort from an employee, by showing that you've taken all those reasonable steps, we hope that it will minimise any liability. But even when you've taken all the reasonable steps, I'm sorry to say it doesn't guarantee complete immunity from any liability. They could still put in a claim, but it shows that you've adopted the guidance that they put in place, as long as you've done it in as thorough a manner you can for your workplace. So I would definitely say that you should publish it, because I think it also shows goodwill to your staff and to clients and people that you deal with. And then there's obviously the notice that you put up as well. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Caroline.
That's okay. Anybody else out there?
Yes, Caroline, I have a question.
Hello,
okay.
hi. Hi,
hello,
Salika.
hi. Actually, let me start video so you can see me. Hello, hi, good to meet you. And good to see Roger. I just wanted to ask if, for example, I need to change working hours, because what I'm planning to do with my staff, I didn't furlough people before, but I cannot be using external contractors who are self-employed, such as clerks. So I will need to just change the hours for my staff to cover. What is the notice? Say I have somebody working Monday till Friday, and I will now need them to work also Saturdays. What is the notice that I need to give them? Because in their contract, actually, they may be required to work weekends, but what is the right way to do it?
Well, under employment regulations, we are expected, when we do a major variation to someone's terms and conditions, we are meant to have a 1-month consultation to discuss it. That's what we're meant to do in the employment rights law. Having said that, if we can agree it, which is I'm hoping we can agree it with your staff, because because of what's going on with this pandemic, many businesses are having discussions about changing of working hours without going through that whole month period of time, because the pandemic is meaning we're having to make quick decisions. So it's very much about building our employees into the process, because I'm hoping that they want to keep the jobs, they want to still work. There's not much work out there. So I think as employers, as long as we come across as fair and reasonable and explain the reasons why, what we need as a business, and we're all part of a team working for the benefit of all of our jobs, and we really need their support in that, and we're doing everything to support them, and we come across as a reasonable employer. I haven't had any clients that have had employees that have not agreed to those variations of working hours. Does that make sense?
It does, and in fact, actually, what I've done, including, because as you may know from the news, in my business, we were given 12 hours to prepare for return to work by the government. So they told us on Tuesday last week that we can go to work on Wednesday. So I have still people working from home, naturally, but I've been discussing with staff, and I actually already discussed that there may be variation in hours, that there may be the changes, and I told them the reason for that is because I first want to safeguard their jobs.
Yeah. Good. Yeah,
therefore, I cannot be using external contractors such as inventory clerks.
Yeah.
And if they want to have their jobs, we will need to make these changes for the business, because until business builds the cash again,
yeah, absolutely.
there wouldn't be
everyone
work.
has
so they are already
has to be flexible. That's absolutely right.
Exactly,
yeah.
And they've got ultimately then choice. If they cannot or they don't want, they can then go and find jobs somewhere else, which I very much doubt that they would.
The difficulty you do have, and which some companies are having, is the childcare arrangements. So some employees can't do the hours we need them to do because they've got children and caring arrangements.
Yeah.
So it's very much that understanding, and which you will do anyway as a good employer, is understanding each person's individual circumstances.
Yes.
And working around there. And it might be the hours that you're suggesting as a business don't quite fit, but you can come to an agreement between the two of you that does work for you.
Yeah.
And I would very much say to all companies, if you're agreeing a variation to hours, get it in writing. Even if it's in an email, just get it in writing, it's agreed. Is that okay? It might be that your variation in hours that you are agreeing is slightly less than what their normal working hours are. And what do we do about pay for that? Because until we go on to this 1st of August with the furlough scheme and part-time hours to being able to do that together, what will you do until that point? Will you be, and it might be you need to ask them to take some holiday to account for some of the hours that they are not able to do, or you can't offer them possibly. And we are all right as employers to enforce or request, as long as we give them the required notice, to take holiday during furlough. So we can do that. And I've got some clients that are asking employees to take their 2 days holiday every month to take it. We have to be assured that they can use that holiday as rest and relaxation under the rules. It's meant to be rest and relaxation. It's difficult in these current times to be, because they can't go away, but we are able to ensure they take holiday. But we have to pay holiday now at 100%. So
yeah,
is that all right? Anybody else? Thank you very much. So anybody else with a question? If not, I've got a few bits of information I can impart as well. But anybody else out there with a question? I've got. Do we just do a variation to contract letter? That's fine. So if you're amending hours, varying hours, you don't necessarily, unless it's a permanent change where we may need to issue a new employment contract. So if you're agreeing a permanent change, then I would suggest you issue a new employment contract. But if it's just a variation of hours and we're doing it for the next few months or whatever we do, it is fine to do that just in a letter, an email. We can call it a side letter. And we just say, this is something that we will add on to your contract, and this is the new working conditions, and it's on a temporary basis, and we will review it on a, we'll review it, because as long as we're clear that this isn't a permanent change to your contract, which it may not be. I hope that answers that question. So just having a look. Some employers are saying, oh, what about a testing regime for employees? I know that a government has got a testing regime, I think that's right, available to all people in the UK over the age of 5. And employers, you could potentially discuss with your employees about getting a test done before they come back into the workplace. So that's, potentially, I know that there was a testing regime up at Silverstone Park. I don't know whether security can help with that. Is it still? Oh, it's for 4 days. Right, okay, so it was only for certain people, but it's worth maybe finding out if that's a possibility. Anybody else? Question?
Just on that, firstly, thank you again, Caroline, for today.
Hi, Paul.
On the testing, I've done like a back to work health assessment, which we were rolling out before on different sites where we had drivers arriving from all over all over Europe. But we were intending to roll it out to staff, just in terms of, have you had these symptoms, just so we've got some idea of what their health situation has been like for the last, whilst we haven't seen them, for the last 2 months even. Are we okay to do that? And what do I need to do with those forms when they come back? It's just, have you had COVID? Do you think you might have had COVID? So we have, as a management team, have a picture of what the prior health of our workforce is, and what risk are we having by them coming back into the workplace. Especially like myself, I'm at home, but I have my very vulnerable mother-in-law here. Do you know what I mean?
It's a worry, isn't it? Yeah.
So my risks about going out and going back into the workplace, about what I bring home to her.
Yeah, sure.
Anything else.
Yeah,
so
because you're shielding effectively. Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of those forms, I haven't really got any guidance about what we can ask, what we can't ask, and what do we do with them when I got them. But they feel like a good way of as you said before, mitigating claim risk.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have to just be aware that those forms are what we call sensitive personal data under the general data protection regulations, because they've got medical information potentially on them, because it's giving some, whether I've got some symptoms or not. So we have to take a little bit more care with those forms in terms of the security of those forms. I'm assuming those forms are sent electronically, not in the post. So I would password protect the forms if you think your drivers are savvy enough to be open them with the password. If you text them the password separately, or when you send it back, I wouldn't necessarily just have them coming on open emails without the form potentially being password protected. I don't know whether that's an issue, a possibility. And when those forms come back, I know that if they're only coming to you, that they are just, from a data protection point of view, you just make sure that they are saved in a secure area of your folder, in the HR folder, which potentially you and another director might have access to. So we just have to be careful that they aren't probably just all stored in one area, that we usually would expect to have different folders for each employee and drop that form into the folder so that it's...
Yeah, I mean, it's unnecessary detail, but our fiddly bit is that obviously I have a workplace issue about people coming back into our workplace, but in terms of the drivers which we have in the field, they might be doing 10 drops a day. Three or four of those sites will require a health assessment. So some of the drivers are doing 4 of those a day, which is why that's having an impact on the logistics industry, as everything's taking much longer, especially if we've got Italian drivers, Spanish drivers coming in, freight, need to drop off, that kind of thing. Okay.
So I guess our risk assessment, the government has published separate industry guidance. Paul, if you can't find it, you might have seen it, and there is a section on drivers that I've seen. If you can't find it, send me a note and I can send it to you. But
I haven't found it. Yeah, well, the holy grail really is that we're able to issue straight to the site some kind of document that says this person has been tested, or this person's we confirm this, here are their forms, so that when they get there, they're straight in and out, as opposed to 40 minutes in a little shed filling it out.
And that's absolutely right. That's the right thing to do. So you've got that extra layer to think about. Generally, the questions, they are fine to ask those questions about symptoms or whatever, because you're not asking about, what you shouldn't ask is about underlying medical conditions, which you probably wouldn't ask, not in a form anyway. It might be something that you'll have as a discussion because you want to check whether they're a vulnerable individual or not. But generally, we don't tend to ask about someone's medical history as an employer unless it's an intrinsic part of their job.
Yeah, it's been a fiddly one. It has been because we've been issuing these forms since middle of February to the drivers, and they've changed a lot since then. But there we are.
No, that's the right thing to do, because again, you need to build that into as you've done, into your risk assessment. That's another action you've taken for drivers and the logistics side, and it makes absolute sense if you build that into the risk assessment, and that's what you're doing. And it might be you need to review whether you're asking them to take a test now, and I guess you're not, but it might be something that you kind of need to consider that they need to do. I don't know how frequently or whatever, but
it's policing the tests. I mean, I can't get the results of that test. You know.
Right, exactly, absolutely, absolutely. So bear in mind that the government has published separate industry guidance. So it's really difficult to find. The government has not made this easy, but there's a raft of guidance on, one in manufacturing, construction, logistical business, about drivers, that kind of thing. I've got quite a detailed document, which, if anybody can't find it, I've got quite detailed guidance, and it does have some links from that document, which is a government guidance. So if anybody wants to email me separately, I can send that on to them. But there is different industry guidance out there as well, which deals with these things. Is that okay?
Thank you very much.
That's all right. Anybody else before we're conscious of time? I like trying to keep to the time. If anybody's got another question to fire before we.
Caroline?
Hi.
Hi. Wilma James from Eyes on Driver Performance. It's not really a question, it's just something to share. We've taken the decision to install a body measurement system, temperature measurement. So anybody comes in through the door, we have a panel that will then tell us if their temperature is very high, and that, then we can say, well, you need to go home. So I don't just another.
That's a great idea, and I think that's very worthwhile. Have you got a lot in the business that are?
Pardon?
Have you got quite a lot of workers in your business and employees?
Well, no, we're very small, but we do have a lot of traffic coming in and out.
Yeah.
Drivers, from all over. So we just took the decision that, it would be best to catch them at the door.
Yeah, no, and that goes back to
foolproof, but
Sure. And it goes back to the other question of the other lady who was asking about visitors to the premises and drop-offs and deliveries, and definitely, and that will be something that as a business, so the risk assessment document is covers all of these things, and each area you will have particular things that you will add into from your business, and one of them will be the temperature check. That is something you've decided to do, and great, put it in. That's what you're doing as another process, another thing, as we were just discussing about the forms going out about drivers and symptoms. So yeah, absolutely, put it into your risk assessment. I think that's a very good step. And as we know, unfortunately, of course, not all people with a temperature with the virus is going to show a temperature, but it's another way. Hong Kong did it right from day one. When Hong Kong got the virus there, they were checking everybody that came into the airport with a temperature check and basically pulling people over, and it stopped the transmission there. Was considering it was right on the edge of people coming in from China, the death rate is very low. So I think it's a great thing to do. So yeah, well done.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Anybody else? And then I think we're nearly finishing up. So I'm just seeing, as someone said, it's a temporary change in working hours, but a few months down the line, I decide I want to keep it permanent. That is completely possible. Again, it's that consultation with the employee. If you've ended up with a reduction in working hours and they've ended up having slightly less pay, they might not want to keep that permanent. So you need to decide what you're going to do about that. It might be that the temporary change in working hours suits them, and the agreement that you've had. When you do the side letter or the email to follow it up, you just need to be able to say, look, this is a temporary change. However, let's see how this continues to work going forwards, because it might work really well for both of us. And then let's have a discussion about it on a monthly basis and see how it's going. We'll have a discussion later on. So I hope that answers that question. Anybody else for the last question before we close down? I'll just see if I've got anything to, I'll just give you a second if anyone's got a question. If not, we've got some businesses where staff are not comfortable coming back into the workplace or even refuse to do so. So that's what I'm hoping, all these risk assessments and discussions and showing what's going on is able to make employees feel confident to come back, and that perhaps not the whole workplace is in, we've got split shifts and split teams, and that it's safe for them to come back. We will still have those vulnerable individuals that will want to shield and not want to come back. So we hope that we can keep them remote working for as long as possible. And really, as I said, the guidance is still remote working unless you can't, you need to come back into the workplace. There will be some that can't remote work, and that's the difficult area. We need them to come back in the workplace, but they can't remote work, and they are a vulnerable individual. And that's been the hardest thing. I mean, that's why we would keep them on furlough pay most likely. It'll be the test will come in August when we would have to, we can't keep them on furlough pay to cover the 80% because we need to make a contribution with part-time. We'll have half furlough, half employer contribution. And unfortunately, then it might be, redundancies are a possibility, and I'm having quite a lot of conversations with businesses about, that is something as an option, or whether that person is taking unpaid leave, using up some holiday, what remote working they can do. But it's a really difficult one, whether they, how we deal with that going forwards is a huge challenge. Anyway, so I hope that's been helpful. Anybody got a final comment, question before we close down? That's fine, lovely. And thank you all very much for attending. I hope it's been useful. If you need any of as I said, the guidance document that I have got, the government guidance, it's about 30 pages or something long. It's quite helpful. Anybody wants that, just email me. I can forward that and it has got links in it that can take you onto other guidance. And I found that document's been really useful. And it was impossible to find. Somebody put me onto it, but when I searched for it, it was very difficult to find. So, as I said, separate industries have guidance as well. So I'm hoping that might lead you to it. If you need any of the risk assessment documents that I've been talking about, again, just let me know. So thank you very much, everybody, and I wish you all a good bank holiday weekend. Thanks then.
Caroline.
Bye.
Bye.